Good afternoon and welcome to our Brighteye European Edtech Tour Greece. My name is Hege and I'm head of community at Brighteye Ventures, where I'm very happy to be able to host events like this. And today I'm very excited to get the chance to explore and learn more about the Greek edtech landscape, which I understand is booming. Co-founder and CEO Pylarinos at Hack the Box and Thanos Papangelis, co-founder and CEO at Epignosis, will share some of their entrepreneurial insights. And for the regional VC view, we're happy to be joined by Partner George Tziralis at Marathon Venture Capital and Nikitas Koutoupes, Managing Director at Insight Partners. Our own managing partner and Greek national, Spiro Latsis, will host both conversations. And you are more than welcome to ask questions for the panelists in the stage chat. But first of all, to introduce Brighteye and dig into some of the trends and characteristics in the Greek edtech market landscape, I'm happy to introduce Rhys Spence, our head of research. All yours, Rhys.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Hege. Firstly, it's great to be here and speaking with you all today. As some of you might know, Brighteye is the most active edtech focused fund in Europe, investing in 7 to 10 new companies every year at seed and Series A. The companies that we work with help people learn and grow. And our interests span the early years to lifelong learning and everything in between. And we do have interests in related sectors too. Our team really specializes in helping companies to scale and internationalize across countries, cultures, languages, and institutional barriers where they present themselves. So hopefully you can now see my screen. Today I'll be speaking through some of the headlines on what's happening in European edtech with a focus on Greece where appropriate. Some of this includes 2021 updates on our annual funding report, which looks at the trends, progress, and prospects of the European edtech funding landscape. One of the symptoms of an exciting area of entrepreneurship and the tackling of important issues is increasing involvement of generalist funds. And we saw a number of funds joining in 2020, and we've already seen some renowned generalist funds entering the fray in 2021, including Andreessen Horowitz, Jan Zuckerberg, Koutoupes, Baldson, and a number of others. And naturally, these funds are focused on the larger deals that we've seen thus far, but we are seeing similar involvement of generalist funds in the earlier stages too, which is of course a real positive for entrepreneurs. This said, the fact that edtech focused funds remain prominent in the majority of deals suggests that a certain degree of focus on edtech represents an advantage to access and lead deals in the space. Given the circumstances, 2020 was a very active time for education and learning technology. We fully anticipate many of the changes made to be continued for the longer term as learners, institutions, and corporates develop blended approaches for the future and flexible working becomes more normalized. We saw more invested in edtech in October 2020 than in the rest of 2020 combined, partially driven by the largest deals of the year in later rounds. And edtech funding in Europe reached record levels in 2020 with 711 million raised across a record number of transactions. Now this is leading to a gradual rebalancing between spending on offline academic resources versus digital learning. 95% of education spending still goes to offline learning, while 50% of learning is soon expected to happen digitally. And this disparity is worth $2.7 trillion. And we have a short explainer video on this gap available on our website for anyone that would like to take a look, and that's with Citibank's Global Head of Education Research. The edtech sector has continued its rampant end to the year. 939 million has already been raised in 2021, which is, quick math, 228 million more than the 2020 total, and we're only 5 months into the year. So if we continue at that rate, we can expect to reach between 1.6 and 2 billion for the year, which is of course between 2 and 3 times the 2020 level, which is really exciting. And while that is exciting in itself, the most significant sign of maturity here is that the $939 million has been raised in only 91 transactions, meaning the average round size is more than triple the size of the 2020 average, so 10.3 million this year compared to 3 million in 2020. And even if you take out the 5 or 6 biggest deals of 50 million plus, the average deal size is still more than double the 2020 average, which bodes well for entrepreneurs with companies at all stages of their growth. And here we have the breakdown of this funding by country. As you can see, in previous years, the UK and France have tussled for the top spot, but we're seeing increasing breadth in the European EdTech entrepreneurship scene. Indeed, the big winner of 2020 was what we've categorized over the past 5 years as the rest of Europe, and most notably Central and Eastern Europe, snapping up 4 times the number of deals done and 12 times the value of deals versus 2019. But looking to 2021, it's clear that most countries are now seeing significant upticks in funding. France leads the UK, but now this chart, this data is more a reflection of where the biggest deals have been done rather than total activity. For example, 200 million of the French total has been raised in only 2 deals. So Ornicar, a Brighteye company, and Open Classrooms. And it's a similar story in Austria with Go Student and the Netherlands with StudentDoc. Greek EdTech entrepreneurs have thus far raised $28 million this year, which is a similar level to Spain. And looking back, you can see where Spain has been as a standalone country in these rankings, and we can reasonably expect Greek entrepreneurs to raise 40 to 50 million to consolidate Greece's rising profile as an EdTech hub. And as mentioned, arguably the most important message from this slide is that the breadth of European EdTech entrepreneurship is widening, and Greece is an increasingly exciting player within this ecosystem. So why is this the case? We've identified 6 reasons why we think Greece is on the rise. So number 1, a strengthening education system. Greece is ranked first in the OECD for STEM grads per capita, and there's university entrance and completion rates far above the OECD average. Number 2, youth unemployment is high but falling since the brain drain that followed the 2008 recession, which peaked in 2013. Number 3, digital skills as a policy priority, as is lifelong learning, and there's a lot of room to run for increasing lifelong learning, considering levels in Greece relative to other OECD countries. Number 4, the country is well positioned, has a range of meaningful international relationships with the US, the EU, of course, the Middle East, and increasingly with China and North Africa as well. And there aren't many countries that can boast the kind of international relations that Greece has been able to maintain. Number 5, VC investment is increasingly available, prompted by the Equity Fund and other initiatives driving investment into Greek businesses. And number 6, an international network of Greek entrepreneurs that have been successful internationally, providing exemplars to their countrymen and women back home. And putting some of this in graphical form, on the left, you can see the steep fall in youth unemployment from 2012 to 2020. And then the pandemic hasn't affected this too badly. Employment levels have already returned to their pre-pandemic levels. And so we can expect those unemployment rates to continue their downward trends in the years ahead. And on the right, you can see that Greece is significantly ahead in the STEM graduate stakes here compared to a number of major economies. And interestingly, it has a 3.5 times the number of STEM grads compared to the US, and almost double the portion of France and the UK. And this range of factors is leading to a strengthening ecosystem with an increasingly diverse set of EdTech companies spawning in the region and internationally by Greek entrepreneurs, one of which we're delighted to be working with in Hack the Box, and we hope to be working with more soon. And we expect these trends to continue given the strengthening support for entrepreneurs at all stages of their development, as per the range of VCs and accelerators set out on this slide, as well as the international investors and companies looking to partner up with Greek entrepreneurs and establish presences in the country. So we believe and hope to see this continue to strengthen in the coming years. And another trend we hope will continue is the increasingly diversified path to liquidity. And they've conventionally been limited in the EdTech space, as we all know, with the only traditional buyers being the large publishing houses. However, we're now seeing a new wave of strategic buyers coming to the fore, such as Adecco acquiring General Assembly, and just earlier this year, Renaissance acquiring Nearpod. And we're also seeing EdTech unicorns and others becoming acquirers, such as Baiju's acquisition of Akash and Koutoupes' acquisition of Clever. And of course, some are going public as well, like Koutoupes. Coursera has gone public at a 4.3 billion valuation, and Duolingo is expected to follow suit later this year as well. So all in all, an incredibly exciting time to be in the space, and really looking forward to hearing more from the entrepreneurs and investors in the thick of it in the sessions that follow. And if you'd like to read the full funding report for 2020 and other insights, please do go to our website to check them out. So again, thank you for listening, and back over to you, Hege.
Thank you very much, Reese. And hello, Alex and Harris and Thanos. I'll leave the stage to you. Good luck.
Thank you both. Thanks, Hege. Thanks, Reese. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much, Harris and Thanos, for joining us today. So today I wanted to ask you a few questions really related to what it's like founding a company in Greece more broadly, also as to why you think that the Greek tech ecosystem has a particular leaning towards Edtech, struggles and benefits of being situated where you are. So to start off with, I just wanted you to maybe say a couple of words about yourself, who you are, just one brief sentence, and then we can jump into some questions. Harris, I'll let you start.
Hi, Alex. Thank you very much for having me. I'm Harris Pylarinos, and I'm the founder and CEO of Hack the Box. Hack the Box is about cybersecurity training. Started in 2017, and now we have a global presence, ranging from very small Greece and up to United States.
Thank you. And Thanos, has Thanos joined us yet?
I seem to have lost him, so I'm trying to get him back in. Oh, here we have.
Sorry,
Thanos.
I'm back.
Okay.
Hi, Alex. Thank you, first of all, for the invitation, and I really appreciate it. A few words about myself. I am co-founder and currently CEO of Epignosis. I have an engineering background, and I always approach entrepreneurship as a way to express my creativity. Epignosis, the company I co-founded, is currently a scale-up. It's a company of over 10,000 customers across the globe. 60% of them are based in the United States, but we do have customers all over the world, actually. And we have raised 2 growth capital rounds from 2 US-based private equity firms, one of which is inside Venture Partners. In total, we have raised $58 million. That's my quick intro.
Thank you so much. So really, the question I'm going to start off with is, what are the advantages and disadvantages broadly of starting a tech company in Greece? We can start with you, Harris, and then you can take the next one. Thanks.
I would say that the biggest advantage is talent, definitely talent. We have a huge pool of talent. We've lost a lot of talent going abroad, obviously, due to limited opportunities. But now there are back incentivizations on bringing this talent back. And with great talent, you can make great companies, no matter what you do. On the disadvantages and the downside, I'd say that there are not any material disadvantages at the moment. There used to be. The only thing I would say is that starting self-funded, it's a bit more costly to start a business in Greece than abroad. But the more you grow, the more cash efficient it is to be in Greece. So not a real disadvantage.
So if I could just dive deeper into that one. So what you're saying is at early stage, there's a particular hurdle, but once an organization becomes a certain size, you see great economies of scale benefiting you as a Greek company versus being somewhere else. Is that right? And
exactly.
why is that? Is that because of is that for fiscal reasons? Is that because of employment law? What structural reasons do you think lead that?
It's basically cash efficiency, ranging from rent, from quality of life for your employees. It's much more efficient to run a business with Greek presence, especially if you can target the global market.
Okay, and in the early stages, I mean, just to clarify, in the early stages, the hurdles are, why is it so much harder when you're first starting up in Greece, or more expensive when you're first starting up as opposed to sort of once you've reached a certain scale?
as I said, the cost is a bit higher. Given that the things you can do by yourself are limited, you have to employ experts to do the job for you. That increases the cost a bit. And finally, the ongoing costs of maintaining a business, again, is quite higher comparing, let's say, for example, in UK. But we are talking about insignificant amounts.
Okay.
After, I don't know, 6 months of operation, let's say.
Okay. And do you find that the government is supportive of making necessary changes to make, the innovation economy a bigger part of the Greek economy?
Definitely, and especially if we look at the last 2 years or so, there's been a huge jump in what is offered to new entrepreneurs in Athens.
Right. And Thanos, I'd like to give the question to you as well. The same question: what are the pros and cons of starting a company in Greece?
Well, first of all, in Greece, one can find a very good balance between talented people and well-educated people, and together a very efficient cost structure, especially if you compare Athens with other established tech hubs like Silicon Valley or Berlin. Greece, Athens is much more inexpensive. I also believe that work ethics and loyalty, which is not granted in other countries, here in Greece is commonplace. Around disadvantages, the main disadvantage from my point of view is that the number of successful entrepreneurs and well-rounded professionals that can work as role models is very small, and that's a problem. There are two additional things, actually, I would like to mention. I used to consider those things as disadvantages, but now I think they are mostly advantages. The first is the financial and political situation. We used to have many issues, but the current government at least is very friendly around entrepreneurship, and we have a number of tax incentives for companies, angels, and individuals, actually, that would like to return to Greece. And the second thing is the maturity of the VC ecosystem. We used to have very small VCs that were not very mature, but during the last few years, I have seen them raising bigger rounds and become much more professional around investments.
Great. No, that's really interesting. I mean, I suppose one of the things that one thinks of when one thinks of Greece is ultimately, unlike other countries, for example, if we talk about Berlin as a hub, the German economy is a huge economy and a great testing ground for products and services. The Greek economy is a tiny economy and a challenging testing ground for products and services. Do you think that forces Greek startups to think internationally from day one, given that both of you appear to have done so? I'll give that to you, Thanos, and then we can go back to Aris afterwards.
Sure, yeah. Well, the reality is that the sheer size of our local economy is not sufficient if someone wants to create a big tech business. So it's important for a tech business actually to think internationally, let's say, from day one. Traditionally, Greek entrepreneurs were a bit reluctant to scale up internationally due to perceived complexity. And perhaps it would be easier for them to do business with local networks and local government. However, my experience at least is that you can scale internationally. It's complex, but it's not nearly as complex as many believe. The internet has turned the whole world into a small village, and assuming we have a good product and a good product fit, it's easier actually today than ever before to grow internationally.
And do you think that there's, would you, if you look at for example, some other small countries, in the Nordics, you see an outsized proportion of tech companies founded in the Nordics, becoming international successes. Do you think it's a similar dynamic there, where because their own economies on their own are not large enough to lead to success stories, that countries like ours are forced to look abroad?
It's similar story. Yeah. Actually, it's the same with Israel as well.
Yeah. Okay, and Harris, I'd love to hear your perspective as well.
Well, I wouldn't say that we are forced to think internationally. It always depends on the business. But given that, as Thanos mentioned, it's now much easier to target internationally, it's a matter of why not. Bigger market, and we have to notice also that depending on the product that the company offers, Greece might prove a very small market. When we are talking, for example, about enterprise offerings, Greece has a quite limited number of enterprises, meaning that sometimes going international is the only way, but definitely not in all cases.
Okay, and this sort of brings me to the next two related questions, which I'll sort of put together. I mean, we've noticed quite a lot of international interest in investing in the Greek startup scene recently. You know, obviously, the rounds that we participated in with you, Harris, that was a round led by a US cybersecurity venture capital firm, a very prominent one. In the case of Epignosis, obviously, Insight Venture Partners, one of the best tech PE shops in the US, if not in the world. Now, obviously, the Greek ecosystem being comparatively small, it might be surprising for people outside of it that there is so much focus and interest. I mean, the easy question is, to ask why, but but also in addition to asking why that's the case, I'm also curious about another thing, which is the rest of Europe and the rest of the tech ecosystem so overvalued or frothy that people are looking to places, smaller ecosystems, to find, better opportunities and perhaps kind of better valued startups that have better value propositions. So sorry for the leading question there, but I'm curious what you think about that.
Should I go first?
Yes, Harris, please.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So I don't have much context, to be honest, about why. I can only speak for my personal experience as a bootstrapped company growing and finally getting investment from abroad. What I've seen is that I really got into the radar of VC firms globally after I got our first investment. Meaning that before raising the first round with Marathon, it was as if we didn't exist. The only offers and reach outs we had from other companies were for acquisition mostly, not for investing. I believe that getting this initial funding puts you on the map, and then given that your product and your future is promising, many more VCs will follow. But on my case, I wasn't identified from abroad initially.
So what you're saying is that the growth and development of the local VC ecosystem was instrumental in you receiving interest.
Exactly. Exactly.
Understood. And that's very interesting because it's a case for VC, I suppose, and it's a good advertisement for ourselves and for Marathon and Insight, because without early stage VCs, you may not have found later stage funding. But in the case of Thanos, you bootstrapped many years. You had already built quite a large client base. You were already successful in your own right before you raised funding. So that's an amazing example of kind of bootstrap to quite large rounds of financing. What was your experience like?
Well, first of all, I consider Epignosis an outlier in the sense that it grew in parallel with the local ecosystem. We had very little visibility actually within our local ecosystem. And that's because we are mostly a company of introverts, so we prefer to experiment with things and try to get to our own truth. when we first approached from private equity, actually based in the United States for an investment, we were already profitable, let's say, and we were about 5 million in ARR. So in reality, we did not need an investment because we have reached a critical size. So unfortunately, the reality is that we did not receive from the local ecosystem the support we would need, perhaps we need initially, but we didn't even ask that, and that's the peculiarity of Epignosis, and it's due to the way that we're thinking, the way that we were growing, and that's the reality.
Okay, so but you're not the only company that has sort of bootstrapped, you know, to a point where you reach a certain critical mass. Arguably, you did as well, Harris. I mean, I know that you said you got the first round of financing, but you had a business before. I believe you had somewhat of a business before then, and it does seem to be a kind of common thread in Greece that there's a lot of bootstrapping, which is I guess quite common for nascent tech ecosystems. You know, you see also lots of bootstrapping in the Netherlands as well. You know, and that's a sort of, arguably in some cases is part of the culture. How much do you think is part of the culture, and how much do you think it's just sort of structural because the infrastructure wasn't in place to give you any other opportunities in bootstrapping?
Again, on my side, and I don't represent the entire entrepreneurial force of Greece. I didn't even know the option of venture funding exists. And specifically, when I received the call from Marathon and they told me that they were a VC, I Googled the word VC to see what it is. So it was mostly a matter of not being educated about those options. So probably it could be me. It could be that not enough information was lying around.
And Thanos, how about you? I mean, you sort of addressed some of this before, but
yeah, we were not within the ecosystem. We were in parallel with the ecosystem. I was following the ecosystem. I was very happy when I was seeing investments happening. However, for Epignosis, things happen naturally. It took more time than is needed. We preferred actually to create a company that was very cost effective, so we didn't really need it. The money, that's the reality. But perhaps it took more time than it needed to create a company at our size. So thinking what can happen differently, perhaps we should raise earlier in order to go faster with something.
The last question I have is it's two-part, and one part has just come up from something that you said earlier, Thanos, about loyalty, which I find very interesting when you talk about Greece and Greeks. But do you, about the ecosystem itself, and I understand you said you sort of existed with outside of it, but when I talk about the ecosystem, I really mean the community of founders of tech companies in Greece. And I know that you do speak to one another and you do share a little bit. Do you find it collaborative, combative? What do you think of the Greek ecosystem? Do you feel like people are working together, or is it more of a competitive situation between young companies? That's assuming that they're not competitors.
It is both, actually. I mean, around engineering talent, perhaps, or around who will create the first unicorn, let's say. Perhaps we are a bit combative, sorry. But I believe that we all have a genuine desire to see the Greek ecosystem growing and the Greek startups succeeding. Many founders also act as advisors to local startups or VCs, which is something similar to what happened to Silicon Valley, actually, where the first generation of founders contributed to the success of the ecosystem there. So it's both.
So mentorship is important then?
Yeah, I truly believe it.
Great. And Harris, what's your view?
First of all, if I had a direct competitor, I would be very combative. I want to state that to future aspirers. But generally, I think the ecosystem, given that it's small, everyone is more tied to each other. So there is a lot of mentorship, a lot of chats to get or give advice to fellow entrepreneurs, and overall a very friendly environment. There are some cases of talent, stealing talent from one company or another, but I think those are quite limited, and mostly it's a very, very healthy environment.
Great. Hege, how am I doing for time?
You are doing great. You can take a few more minutes for questions if you want. Yeah.
So yeah, I will. I just want to ask one quick question about loyalty because you mentioned it, and then Hege, I can't seem to find the questions that the crowd have asked. So if you can sort that out for me whilst I ask this, please, and paste them into the main stage chat. Okay, so you mentioned loyalty. It's an interesting thing because obviously in most tech ecosystems, loyalty is kind of at the very bottom of priorities, both for the talent and also even in some cases for the sort of C-suite or executive teams, where really it's about sort of joining the next hot thing. It's about it's about very much about what's in it for me. And there isn't kind of a massive sense of loyalty unless it's built in somehow to some incentive scheme. Do you think that the sort of loyalty is that you describe as something cultural? Is it something Greek? Is it because of how young the ecosystem is? Why do you mention loyalty? I'm curious about that.
That's an interesting question. First of all, for us, loyalty was a key ingredient for our success. We are working together with several people for many years. For me personally, the team, people that work together for many years is important because somehow people, after working together for a long period of time, somehow they start having a superpower. Things become easier, collaboration becomes faster, and trust increases. So I think it's important. Somehow I think that the fact that the ecosystem here is less mature than United States or other important hubs improves loyalty because people want to stay longer. It might be cultural as well, part of it. But the reality in Greece, I believe people stay longer with companies, and I think it's important for their success.
Harris, what's your experience?
Regarding loyalty?
Yeah. I mean, only what you're comfortable sharing. Obviously, I don't want you to badmouth anyone.
Of course. Well, we still haven't had a single case of a person saying, I'm leaving you for another company from the Greek team. I think that if you apply the standards abroad to Greece, automatically you are one of the best places to work, given the non-startup ecosystem. And that makes talent, of course, loyal, and also showing great appreciation for what your company offers to them. So I'd say yes, they are loyal, and I'm not considering it to be a Greek thing. I think it's a matter of circumstances. Finally, I want to add to that, and we've seen this, that in Greece, it's much more difficult for any person to pivot to a new job. There is always a risk involved because there is a big risk of staying unemployed. And I believe that this also exists in people staying more because whenever you switch and go to a new company, something might not work out, and you couldn't afford to stay unemployed for even a few months.
Okay, that's interesting. Sort of a more structural reason for the loyalty. So I have one question from the crowd. We have a slightly quiet crowd today, but thank you for your question, Victoria. So she said, I'm curious about the angel scene in Greece. Do they back startups or more UK and other European startups? I mean, this may also be a question to address to some of the investors later. Any interesting success stories about angel-backed ventures in Greece, especially in Edtech? Maybe Edtech is too specific because obviously we have a relatively small ecosystem of companies, even though they've been very successful. But in general, what do you think the role of the angel scene is in Greece? Is it developed? Is it underdeveloped?
I think it is growing together with the VC ecosystem. They go hand by hand. So there are a number of angel investors. I prefer angel investors that are previously exited entrepreneurs. We do not have too many of them. So I think as long as the exits happen, previous entrepreneurs will become angel investors. I would be interested at least to do that and help other entrepreneurs.
How about yourself, Harris? Did you have experience working with angels? I think you said you only raised from Marathon, right? So there were no angels involved.
Exactly, no angels involved. Although I fully agree with Thanos, I have the same mindset that if and when I exit, I would want to give back to the ecosystem.
Great. Well, listen, I thank you both very much for your time today. Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ. And we're going to now move on to the next discussion with George and Nikitas. So Hege, I'll hand it back to you. Thanks a lot, guys.
Yes.
Thank you, Alex.
Thanks, Harris. Thanks, Thanos. And as soon as I hate to kick you off, but to let the stage open to Nikitas and to George as well. That's it, and I'll leave it to you. Good luck, guys.
Hi, guys. Good to see you. So yeah, I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. I asked the other gentlemen to do. Just quick sentence on each of you, introducing yourselves and your funds, and then we'll jump into 3 questions.
Go ahead, George.
Nikita, you go. Okay.
Please.
Thank you, Alexander, for having us. What a fantastic topic today and line up. So I'm George Tziralis. I'm a partner at Marathon Venture Capital. We work with Greek founders from around the world. We typically put the first million in technology companies, and we then help them to grow and raise their next money from the likes of Nikitas and Insight.
And I'm Nikitas Koutoupes. Although I grew up in Greece, I've been in the United States for 30 years, 20 of those years at Insight Partners, a large venture capital private equity fund specializing in software. But I personally spent about half my time in Edtech. And like George said, our goal, especially in Greece, is to become kind of the growth partner of choice for the startup ecosystem.
Great. Thank you both. So thanks a lot for taking the time today. I guess the sort of the big question for both of you, if you were to extract your national identity from the equation, and obviously Nikitas, you've been away for a while as I have, and our accents are there to show for it. In the case of both of you and myself, obviously we all have an affiliation with Greece, personal one. So if you had to extract that, what makes the ecosystem of Greek founders and companies compelling to you as investors? Whoever wants to start can start.
I'll go, given the distance, I guess. So for many years, I because I wanted to be objective, because everything we do at Insight is based on the same yardstick. I knew very little about the ecosystem in Greece. We were totally inactive in Greece. And it was actually not our choice. It was the way we sourced deals that led us to get engaged in Greece. It was our young analysts who called, 25,000 companies a year for us to find, 40, 50 investments to make. That started producing companies that, from the bottom up showed that there was a lot of growth, a lot of potential across software, not specific to Edtech. And that's usually the way we assess opportunity, from the bottom up. How many companies are producing good growth rates at attractive markets? Obviously, I was solicited given I speak the language, although broken after 3 decades. And what we had one investment 2.5 years ago. We're about to announce a second one. But what is attracting us broadly to the ecosystem is that it's a lot of the combinations that we've seen in other countries, producing phenomenal companies, but in its early stages. So phenomenally well-educated talent, loyal, like the previous panel mentioned, especially in the engineering side, quite apt. Very good understanding, communication skills in multiple languages, obviously English, and an entrepreneurial mindset that somehow was the silver lining of the crisis, that had people that would otherwise have gone to the public sector or to banks or to multinational corporations take a risk on the entrepreneurial side, for which they are being rewarded now. So if we keep feeding this, all the ingredients seem to be there. I mean, there's some that are missing, like, kind of tax environment and employment law and all of that, but there's a lot of opportunity to produce in Greece what we've seen in Berlin and Dublin and Tel Aviv.
Excellent. And
George,
if I have to add a few more words on that, and I have to note that I am as biased as one can be about the Greek startup ecosystem, I can share that in our experience, people in our community pretty much share the following qualities. As Nikitas mentioned, they are entrepreneurial, so they find solutions, not problems. They are truly well educated. Learning is their second nature. They are hardworking. You won't find, pubs filling up at 5 p.m. in Athens, right? And at the same time, they are hungry for success in a good way. So they go the extra mile to make things happen. And if you ask me, these are the core prerequisites that matter for a startup ecosystem to take place, right? At the same time, as Nikitas also highlighted, it is still too early, and on our behalf, we love being early, helping things happen and making an impact, right? And I have to say that, as we speak the same language, both literally and metaphorically, we can tell the difference on what's great versus not, and we can also be of real help on what needs fixing. And at the same time, also, we can help leverage what is really special, right? And another note on this, as you know, I would like to say that we Greeks also tend to care for each other. And, this is not just transactional for us. This is more than a business, right? And as we want to see our people succeed, I believe that caring compounds over time, right? And this is part of our unique proposition, I would say, in this panel.
Thank you. Great responses both. So just focusing on education, you said, George, that education is second nature, to Greeks. Why do you think so many of the success stories, 2 of which we've met today, at different stages, obviously Hack the Box at a slightly earlier stage and Epignosis is a slightly later stage, but with such a small ecosystem, there are a number of, a sort of outsized number of education technology companies or education-focused technology companies. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think that if we take a step back, education and learning is probably the top priority for Greek families. It is deep in our culture. We are well aware that social mobility can only triggered by education in the first place. And right because of that, Greek parents probably spend more on education rather than anything else. So they care from a very young age, let's say, for their kids taking extra classes as early as in primary school. And then they worry about their children, not just graduating, but also, getting a master's or even a PhD, right? And of course, this goes on. You can find a lot of Greek students or professors pretty much in every major university globally. We are in top quartile performance in terms of graduates and researchers per capita. But also you can see Greece as a top country in terms of engagement in popular online learning platforms like Coursera or LinkedIn Learning and so on and so forth. So this mentality, this culture of learning and training, I think it is deeply entrenched in our community and its values. And in this context, I believe it is only natural to see startups related to education and learning emerging out of the ecosystem. And if you ask me, I still believe even for this specific vertical, it is still early. So companies like Epignosis, LearnWords, Hack the Box, but also, Skooks, 100 Mentors, and so many more are now paving the way, and their success is breeding more founders and technologists, building the next generation of Edtech companies out of Greece.
Great.
I think there's another perspective here, though. I agree with George that you will succeed in something you're passionate about, and you tend to be passionate about things that were formative values, kind of culturally when you were growing up, of course. But there's something about education, the way it is, the way business models can emerge in the space that makes it particularly a good fit for Greek entrepreneurs, which means if you look at a lot of the companies that George mentioned, it's the ability to leverage the fact that education and tools for education can be disseminated without, people in suits selling software around the world, with a freemium model, with the frictionless. If the product does your talking for you, you don't need to have a huge organization with many offices, but still build a phenomenal business. So the ability of education to create these types of business models through digital content, through easy to use software, easy to deploy software, may have something to do with the concentration of successes and kind of great companies we've seen in Greece, where you can have, like Epignosis, you can have a couple hundred people in Athens, but have 70% of your revenue come from the US. Right? There's other sectors that make that prohibitive. Okay.
Understood. No, that makes lots of sense. And sort of with that in mind, I mean, do you think that there's something, and I sort of addressed this to the founders earlier, do you think that there's something about Greece being small, it being forced to look abroad, that gives it almost an unfair advantage? Because you don't have the choice to spend 2 or 3 years building market share in Germany or in France. You need to build an international product, both an international product in terms of the technology, but also an international product in terms of content, because Greek is such a small language. Is that almost an unfair advantage, even though it's a limitation?
Well, it's not an unfair advantage. It's a reality that applies to pretty much most of the European countries, beyond the large ones, also Israel, etc. And, it is great to see that people building startups in Greece only consider the local market as an afterthought, right? Or they don't consider it at all. And I think many of the founders, they are doing startups because of that, partly because of that in the first place. And this is why we end up with more companies selling globally from day one, and exactly because of that, being able to grow at a significant level.
And so if you have a Greek company with Greek costs selling in the US, obviously you have you have interesting sort of unit economics at play there. So Nikitas, I mean, could you comment a little bit about the sort of valuation arbitrage, but also this almost this sort of operational arbitrage of having companies with a sort of main base in Greece and functioning internationally?
I mean, it's a double-edged sword because in the very beginning, it's extremely attractive. We see companies where the so-called rule of 40, right? The sum of your growth rates and your profit margin. We see companies that are, in the 80, 100, 120% range, precisely because of the cost advantage of being in Greece. And it's a wonderful situation for us because, in a Silicon Valley deal, our job as investors would be to kind of say, hey, this may be too aggressive, to have our foot kind of firmly on the brake. Here, it's very clear that there's money being left on the table by not investing in certain things that are great. So having the cushion of a profit margin, which coincidentally I think came from the crisis. These businesses are made resilient because the entrepreneurs needed to fall back on the business itself. There was no VC to go back to. There was no, in the genesis of these companies, that had to be built resilient, which is a contributory factor to the ecosystem being successful. However, at exits, right, when you're trying to take a company public, when you're trying to convince a strategic that's based somewhere in the middle of the United States that this is an extremely valuable business, obviously the income statement speaks for itself. But somehow you have to show that this is as valuable a business, in fact, more valuable a business than something they would find in their backyard. So infusing the company with Western American, in my case, talent, not because they have anything else to prove or because we have anything to justify. It's more about the buyer than it is about the seller in this case.
That's really interesting.
But it is something that you cannot ignore when you're into kind of exit planning for a company.
So I mean, what you're talking about there really is kind of perception, the power of perception, and if you can mold perception, even if it's just more a little bit more on the surface with presenting people with things they're more familiar with, and the underlying business is good, then you can overcome those challenges.
I mean, bias may come into play, but I'm talking about pure perception of risk. Mm-hmm. Someone sitting in Indianapolis may say, I may want the company that's in Texas versus the company that's in Athens because I know how to deal with that company. I know how to integrate. So you have to make that conversation easy for them. You have to say, no, you're actually buying a huge advantage because you can double down on the Athens base or the Thessaloniki base and have, for the rest of your company, not just for the piece that you will be combining with.
So let's put this in another way. I think everyone's target here is to make Greek startups less exotic, right? And this transcends across, various functions, etc., and so on and so forth.
Exotic is the perfect word. It's, it's attractive. You want to see it. You don't want to get indigestion, though. So you have to make it a little more palatable. Yes, absolutely. I very much agree with that word, George.
Great. My last question, and then I'm going to go over to some questions from the audience. Where do you see the tech ecosystem evolving in 5 or 10 years in Greece? And the second part of that question is, do you think it can provide meaningful value for the local Greek economy?
Yeah, Nikita, you go first.
I mean, without a doubt, the activity that I see from funds of our size or slightly smaller or larger being interested in Greece, purely as a function of the difficulty to find you have to start turning over new rocks. And it turns out that under this one, there's a lot of interesting things to invest in. So yes, absolutely. A combination of basically emulating what has happened in Berlin or in Tel Aviv. We need to see influx of non-Greek talent into Greek companies in Greece. that would be a great indicator that this is working. We need to have more exits, like the deal yesterday, the Greek unicorn, right? This was a phenomenal piece of news. It's aspirational internally, but it also, trips a lot of wires to the buy side, saying I should be paying attention. You have to make it easy for people to come work in Greece, not just the young engineer who's going to leave Germany to come in Athens, because it's becoming increasingly hard for a startup to hire, but also the CEO, the head of marketing, that can find living in Greece as an opportunity, but they need the visa requirements, like all the basics, all the logistics, the tax side has to be fixed. But I do think that given the all the elements of the recipe being there, I don't see why we should not, at the very least, we should not be investing heavily behind it as an ecosystem, as a country, and as kind of outside investors. Absolutely. We certainly will keep looking, and we look forward to having 5 or 6 Greek deals over the next 2-3 years.
Great. George,
let me answer. Let me try to answer in the following way. So, a couple years back, we met with one of the founding fathers of the Israeli ecosystem, right? And as we were sharing some color on our current status of the Greek startup community, he went a bit nostalgic of the early stages in their ecosystem, because the patterns were very similar, right? And he said, what you are building now is going to have a lasting effect, right? And rest assured that you are well beyond the stage when it was still under question whether the Greek startup industry is happening in a big way or not. So I'll leave you with this.
Great. No, thank you. I think I very much agree. And I have to say, there's one thing that Greece has an advantage in, which is that, first of all, it's in Europe, which is an understated advantage for a country. It's a small group. We're a small group, and it's a good group to be in. And also, honestly, it can't be understated that it's a pleasant place to base yourself. And I think that is going to attract, I'm hoping certainly it's going to attract founders of companies that have no affiliations with Greece whatsoever. But if the country makes it easier for those people to move to Greece, to work in Greece, to establish companies in Greece, that you could have a sort of a bit of a Bali effect, where people are coming to work from Greece, but to run companies all over Europe and all over the world. I certainly hope that happens. Anyway, well, listen, I'll have one more question. I have a question from the audience. So this is from Daphne from Berlin. I would like to be more involved in the startup ecosystem in Athens. What are the best ways you found for Greek founders abroad to stay connected? I don't know if either of you guys would like to take that. Daphne is at Wonderpath in Berlin.
George, that's probably you.
Yeah, well, Daphne, we are all online, right? There are various events taking place, and I'm sure that post-COVID, there will also be many ones offline, right? So I would suggest that you continue connecting with fellow Greek founders around Europe and the globe. And, we all can take it from there. I think that's the essential part.
I'll just ask the audience if they have any further questions, or anyone from the Brighteye side. Now's your chance, and we have a few minutes left. And if not, then I'll ask one more question, and then we can let these gentlemen get back to their days.
Alex, also share your views from the number of companies you've been in touch with from Greece.
Yeah, happy. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. So my view, obviously, I'm partly biased, but I also see some of the advantages I think, completely objectively of Greece. On the one hand, I'm very proud of being Greek. Greek culture is part of who I am. But I've been away from Greece my entire life. I've never lived in Greece. I've always lived abroad. I'm more francophone than I'm, Grecophone. So I'm familiar with French culture and with, in terms of, I grew up in a French-speaking city, and spent a lot of time in the UK. So I do have some distance, and what I see is very much what Nikitas sees, which is I see companies that are extremely resourceful, that care about bottom line, which I agree it's a double-edged sword, because sometimes it can be a barrier to scaling or a hurdle to scaling because people are more tentative in their kind of growth mindset. But what I see is a lot of very hungry young entrepreneurs who are trying to solve problems. And I see teams, and this is why I've sort of focused on the loyalty part. I see teams where loyalty is sort of built into the team at a very early stage and where it persists through time. And I think, having at some point in my career being a founder of a startup myself, of a couple of startups, loyalty is extremely important. And if you have that as an attribute within a tech ecosystem, alongside other benefits, like, for example, low labor costs, especially for engineers. Greek engineers are around 30 to 35% less expensive to hire than engineers in the UK, for example, or in Germany. So if you have a combination of loyalty and the capacity to build a large team of engineers, and other professionals with relatively little capital, you have automatically, I think, quite an interesting ecosystem. So number of companies. I mean, I've spoken to all of the relevant companies in Edtech in Greece. Some of them have been mentioned today. I'm constantly monitoring what else is going on just for my own interest. But I think it's an exciting ecosystem, and at Brighteye, we're very happy to dive into it. I have one more question from the crowd, which is Cyprus at all on the radar of Greek investors? Have you seen any interesting ventures, and do you find the bridge between Greece and Cyprus strong enough or with room to improve? There's at least one company I can think of that we all know that has a strong link between Greece and Cyprus, but I'll let you guys chat about it.
Yeah, so on our end, we've already made an investment with our first fund in Cyprus, and we are going soon to announce another one with our second fund. To us, Cyprus, is an extension of our community. So we are actively monitoring what's happening in the island, and we would love and appreciate more opportunities to do more work there.
I see it the same way. I see the obviously there's a lot of benefits of the tax environment in Cyprus, which makes it extremely attractive, especially for very profitable companies. But the companies that are able to, on top of that, have offices in two places, be able to scale in both places, so that if you cannot find a team member in one market, you can probably find on another. It's just extra optionality. And like George said, just kind of culturally the same. So quite an elegant way to grow.
Well, listen, I think we've just got 1 minute left, which is enough time for me to thank you both for coming and to thank everyone for coming today. I think it was a really interesting discussion. And I hope that we've managed to reach some people outside of the Greek diaspora today, which I think we have, looking at some of the names here on the guest list, and that we can continue to attract not just sort of international investors with Greek affiliations, but investors of all kinds to Greece, to look at Greece as a serious ecosystem, which we all believe it is. Hege, I'll let you close the ceremony.
Thank you so much, Alex. And thanks, George and Nikitas, for sharing your knowledge and experience. Really appreciate that. And thanks to all of you out there for listening, asking questions on our 5th stop on the European EdTech tour. For the next event, we'll be in the UK on the 16th of June. So save the date and watch this space, and we'll come with more details of that. Thanks, everyone, and have a good afternoon and evening.
Thank you.